The number one rule of entrepreneurship in general is never run out of cash, right? And I think you should really respect this rule and do everything yourself and be very, very cautious with when and how you bring new people on board.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Statmer Show. Today, we welcome Nabil Ahmed, an experienced entrepreneur through multiple businesses in US and MENA. His experience spanned through executive positions and investor positions in multiple businesses. Today, we go through his journey and his take on the current investment scape in MENA and his take on the private equity and VC playbook, specifically in MENA. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you. سيد نبيل، أهلا بك في سفنة.
أهلا وسهلا. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Okay, سيد نبيل، ممكن تحكي لي شوي عليك وعلى خبراتك السابقة؟
والله أنا أصلا مهندس إنتاج. اتخرجت من زمان شوية، احنا خلاص عجزنا يعني. اشتغلت في فودافون لمدة 3 سنين. الحقيقة حظي جه حلو في الحاجات اللي عملتها هناك، وتعلمت من ناس جامدة وكان وقت كويس جدا في زمن الشركة. فتعلمت شوية إدارة المنتجات صح والعملية المالية بتدار ازاي والكلام ده كله. جيت بعد كده تشوقت ان انا اتعلم عن يمكن مجالات اخرى في وقت قصير جدا، فروحت عملت شهادة MBA. الحمد لله ربنا وفقني واتقبلت ساعتها في جامعة هارفارد. قعدت 2 سنين هناك، وطبعا اتعلمت من ناس عظماء. وبعد كده اتخرجت لقيت نفسي عايز اشرب شوية من الحرفية اللي في الشركات الجامده جدا. فروحت عشت بقى في مدينه سياتل، واشتغلت في اغلب وقتي هناك في شركه امازون. وامازون طبعا مدرسه يعني ومخرطه في نفس الوقت، بس اتبسطت جدا، اشتغلت كتير. جيت بعد 5 6 سنين لقيت نفسي عايز ارجع مصر بقى وابتدي افيد وابتدي اطبق اللي انا اتعلمته في البيئه الاساسيه اللي انا كبرت فيها واللي انا عايز اموت فيها. فرجعت مصر من 5 سنين وشويه، دلوقتي 5 سنين داخلين على 6 سنين. اشتغلت في انستا باج، ناس جميله جدا، مع معتز وعمر. مسكت هناك فريق المنتجات، الديزاين، التصميم، وشويه فرق تانية صغيره. وبعد كده اتحركت على شركه اسمها فورسيل، هناك مدير عام وكومباني اوفيسر، مدير اداره المنتجات ومدير التكنولوجيا. كان عندي بقى مكتب بحاله بالمهندسين بتوعه، بالشؤون العاملين بالكلام ده كله عشان اديره. فدي برضو كانت اكسبيرينس حلو الحمد لله. ودي بالذات حققت نتائج، او حققنا، ربنا وفقني بفريق هايله من سنة ونص. قررت بقى ان انا اوجه طاقتي ناحية شوية استثمارات وشوية افكار انا بقالي كتير قوي متشوق ليها. فاستثمرت في كذا شركة، من صغيرين لمتوسطين، وفي نفس الوقت كمان بدأت كذا حاجة على جنب بنفسي. بس يا سيدي ده كده، مش عايز اطول عليك.
ممتاز. يعني انت صراحه اول جيست بيكون هارفارد جراجويت للبودكاست، فممتن جدا لوجودك.
يعني نتمنى يعني نكون
يكثروا
عند حسن ظنكم.
باذن الله. طبعا شيء جميل جدا انك انت رجعت لمصر، وهذا شيء المرغوب ان الخبرات ترجع وتفيد الاقتصاد الام.
ان شاء الله الاقتصاد يستفيد، اهم حاجة
باذن الله.
الاقتصاد يعني يضرب في السماء.
باذن الله. طبعا سيد نبيل، زي ما انت حكيت لنا، انت كنت في امازون سياتل، وشايف انك انت اشتغلت في الكوميرس سكشن لامازون، كذلك برايم فيديو، وحاليا حكيت انك انت في مصر في الشرق الاوسط. طبعا هقول لك السؤال ده بالانجلش عشان يكون واضح اكتر. In the case of Amazon, it's growth at all cost, meaning Amazon always born through their free cash flow. Almost every quarter, they born their cash flow to continue on growing, as based on the last quarter. So you came from this world of growth at all cost and burning the free cash flow, and now you have moved a bit to the private equity world, where free cash flow means a lot and EBITDA means a lot to them, so they don't like spending. How has that changed the way you look at a business before you decide to run it or invest in it?
Okay, so let me first kind of just challenge a bit the premise that Amazon was kind of growth at all costs. I think there were phases in Amazon's history when it was like that very early on, and the company was about to die maybe 1 or 2 times. Like it came in very serious, liquidity problems, especially after the dot-com bubble burst. I think since then they've been very big on growth, but also pretty responsible with managing their cash. And the finance people over there, especially the people who manage working capital, free cash flow, credit, are some of the best that I've ever seen. Um, so I wouldn't say that they're just trying to grow and they're burning through cash. It's just that the cash that is burned is assigned and planned very carefully. The cash that is invested is also assigned and planned very carefully. And I think that that's really the sign of a maturing company that's running operations well and responsibly and returning money to its investors. I think private equity in general has a pretty fixed mandate to bring down costs and to make a company run, much leaner, so that a short-term selling operation can happen. And so they're less concerned with growth. In fact, they buy companies that have already, hit a certain point of growth. They've already matured. They're already plateauing, and they don't really care, or it's not their job to care. Like it's not their mandate to care about the potential growth of this company in the future, even if this company can 10x or 100x if it's managed correctly. So they like to manage for loss. They manage for downside. They don't optimize for upside. So that's pretty different playbook. So with private equity, certain cash items like um, investing in marketing, payroll, office rent, like really, really, really come into play because every cent saved um, out of these items goes directly back into the investor's pocket.
ممتاز، ممتاز. و يعني بخبراتك أنت يعني هل هذا غيّر نوعًا ما من رؤيتك لأي business أو تصرفك لأي business تدخل فيه؟
انا لما بلاقي بيزنس من وراه investors معينين that are very heavily private equity oriented, ببقى يمكن خايف شويه على الفاوندرز بتوع البيزنس وخايف شويه على الناس القدام اللي فيه اللي طلعوه، علشان ممكن قوي الوضع اللي هم فيه يضطرهم ان هم يعملوا حاجات هم مش عايزينها خالص بسبب في حد معاه الاغلبيه والحد ده بيقول له وفر هنا وزود هنا. الحاجات اللي البرايفت اكويتيز ساعات بتعملها آم، ذكيه جدا ماليا، بس ساعات ممكن تبقى مضره للقيمه القصوى او القيمه طويله المدى بتاعت اي شركه. فيمكن اكتر ناس ممكن يتوجعوا من حاجه زي كده غير لو هم totally aligned with they really already think the way a private equity company thinks. Some founders may find a difference in vision او كده. بس by the way being backed by VC investors او being backed by banks او being backed by sovereign funds has its downsides برضو. فprivate equity playbook is a playbook. It works for some people. It doesn't work for some people. I found it unnecessarily short-sighted, but I know a lot of operators who have no problem working in private equity backed companies, and they would do it again and again and again because to them it's exciting in a different way.
Okay, thanks for the clearance. You led a revamp on ForSale's operations before. Can you tell us a bit about what you have done there when it comes to, let's say, cost cutting and efficiency? What operational efficiency drove the eventual success after your period at ForSales?
The I think what I came in and tried to do and succeeded to a great extent was to utilize the resources that were already there and maybe add a few more towards just getting much more out of them than they were currently producing. So the team was kind of just very fluid, very fungible, continue to produce features out into the future. And so I'm pretty good at kind of coming with
Sorry,
that.
I should have asked you this question earlier. هو شو كان نوع البزنس بالضبط? What was the business model of ForSale?
ForSale is like Craigslist. It's like Dubizzle. It's a platform where people list things that they're selling to other people, and the platform just makes the money. That it's advertising basically. Well, ForSale is especially strong. Actually, it's only strong in Kuwait. It has a pretty good stronghold on the audience in that country. Internally, the company was undefined, like its process structure, people, mechanisms. So I came in and helped uh, run it, I think, well, so that everything became clear. Lines of accountability were pretty well drawn. Um, And then I started focusing on cost cutting. So I found that we were overspending significantly when it came to SEO and other marketing items that did not give us the bang for our buck that we were looking for. We were underspending on payroll. Um, and this is where, again, like I had a back and forth with the board on whether this is necessary or not. I found it necessary every single time because my point of view was, you have no asset here besides the brand. So your asset has to be your intellectual capital. Your asset is not your land. It's not a factory. It's not a certain legal or regulatory arrangement. Um, it's not that you have, for example, a contract with a big foreign producer or something. It's just it has to be your feature set and how good your people are, and the compound effect of their work together over time, producing an experience that's much better for customers than the closest competition. So I think we ended up like at some point. I'm not sure if I can say the number or not, but like we cut pretty significant costs, especially from AWS platforms, just by making sure our clusters and our servers were well utilized, and the marketing costs that I was mentioning.
Okay, so you would say the biggest factor was expensive softwares, expensive IT spending. That
No,
was
no. I was actually pretty good about that. Um, we had a lot of softwares, but we did not overspend there. We were pretty lean with that sort of thing. In fact, I think we cut a few and kind of bundled a lot of what we try to do through less programs and less subscriptions than we were doing before. And so the downside of that is obviously you have more reliance on one service, but the upside is you get to save costs and you simplify everything, and the
so.
data and is more accurate.
I see in your case it wasn't mostly about cost cutting. أنا شايفها أكتر من هي تكون restructuring
Oh, that's
للبزنس.
true. Oh, that's true. My mandate at ForSale was definitely not to cut costs. I did that anyway with certain line items that I thought warranted it. And I did the opposite, by the way, with certain line items that I thought should be more, we should pay more for.
أنا شايف إن دورك كان أكتر من إنه يكون efficiency من إنه cost cutting. أوكي
Oh,
ممتاز.
that's أنا مهندس إنتاج. Uh, ف, if it's not about efficiency, then I don't think I would be a valuable addition to a company.
بالضبط. أوكي خلينا بننتقل لسكشن أخرى اللي هي بتكون profitability mandate. طبعا خبرتك أنت واسعة في هذا المجال، والسؤال بيكون around identifying waste. فيه بعض الfounders بيكونوا يفضلوا يخلوا شوية some items or products on their software or their app that mostly doesn't drive growth or doesn't drive revenue, doesn't drive any profit. And in the case of a PE environment, as in your background, how do you convince the team and the founders to stop building these gadgets, these products or solutions on their app or software and only focus on what's gonna be driving the growth, the revenues, the free cash flows, you know it.
Um, I think that the best thing to do with gifted people is to make sure you compartmentalize their time, or you help them, give them a framework on how to separate their time between work that always has to be done and that needs follow up and that needs focus and that needs some collaboration, and between exploratory things that make them curious, that they want to go do because they think a good thing might come out of it, right? So with most talented people, you don't want to stop that. right? And you don't want to just trap them inside. If you're not working with talented people, if you're just working with someone who wants a salary, then yeah, I mean, they'll do whatever you ask them to do and exactly 0% more than that. I don't know how to really work with people who don't have that drive. And so the part of what you get with that package is a natural curiosity and a natural sense of adventure, and a natural kind of elevated energy that you deal with. So you have to have a nozzle to let that out. You can't just, trap them inside and say anything that doesn't generate free cash flows. Plus, in tech, especially, there are times where you really don't know where value can come from, and you need to give your team the latitude to try different things. Like saying like this is what we're doing and we don't want to do anything else basically means that you're saying to them, okay, half of you don't really shouldn't really be at the company even, right? We don't need that many team members. If you're going to run something on its kind of just extremely lean so that the only people that are there are the people who are very necessary to maintaining the core cash cow of the company, then you end up with very, very few people to run the whole company. The problem with that, the good thing about that is that it saves cost on the short term. The bad thing about that is that it changes the company's DNA to essentially an oil rig, right? Or like with the government, for example, there's like a bunch of public sector companies that run the electrical grid that are making money hand over fist anyway. The problem with that is that the government isn't a company and a company isn't a government. So governments sometimes don't die. And even if administrations inside the government die, you know, there are certain systems that millions of people are reliant on. So it's okay for something to be a poorly maintained cash cow as long as it continues to be a cash cow. The problem really is when you apply this sort of thought to companies, because companies are a living thing. They're like a human body. You have to continue to nourish them. When you bring them down to their most, like their minimal capabilities, um, what ends up happening is that the body changes forever. So if I take you and I put you into a solitary prison for a year, right, you'll lose a ton of weight, right? If I take you out of the prison and you'll gain some weight, but you will have physical and psychological after effects because of that year that you spent in the solitary cell forever. So it changes forever what a company can do and what it can be and what it can aspire to. And I believe that companies are ever growing and ever evolving, except if you absolutely dominate a very big sector and half of the job is politics, and the ceiling of your achievements, financially at least, is pretty clear. And usually the companies that are in that position are not backed by private equity firms.
So private equity is the devil's advocate for tech companies, let's say.
Um, I would say I'm not that I don't really like the VC playbook has a ton of problems. I don't believe in burning cash and being irresponsible. And I think the number one rule of entrepreneurship in general is never run out of cash, right? And I think you should really respect this rule and do everything yourself and be very, very cautious with when and how you bring new people on board. With all of that said, swinging to the complete other side of the pendulum, where you're just extremely rigid about where you spend and how you spend, and unimaginative really, and lacking um, in creativity or even in kind of long-term reasoning or deductive reasoning to be able to see some of the things that can be done if you could just not be so insistent on saving like an additional $10. uh, that's the part that I struggle with. And again, like, it's not just with private equity. There's plenty of investors that are like that. It's just a persona and a way of investing that is most frequently manifested in private equity firms, but not necessarily at all. I've seen people who are way stingier than private equity firms, and they're just private or angel investors.
What is the business model or thesis that convinced you to invest and become a board member in it? exactly.
Well, Palm is awesome. First of all, Palm
Okay,
is
okay. I want to know more.
um Palm is trying to democratize wealth management. It's as simple as that. High net worth people in Egypt have access to services, premium services, by some of the banks and some of the financial services firms that allow them to put their money with people who are extremely good at local trading and local arbitrage within the local stock market. They know what they're doing with real estate. They know what they're doing with stocks. They know what they're doing with bonds, with gold. And so you give your money to people like that, they'll generate returns that are phenomenal, like things that you wouldn't even get from the NASDAQ, right? The trouble is that these services are only available to a very restricted few people and behind closed doors and large marble hallways with oak doors that the average Egyptian citizen with just a bank account who gets a salary from his company just has zero access to, right? Now, in the 80s in the US, what happened is that companies like Fidelity and Vanguard basically took this private wealth management that was very exclusive towards VIPs and took it and scaled it or democratized it across to normal people. And that's really what actually created the modern 401k and the modern retirement account, where you put part of your salary somewhere and it's invested for you by professionals. It's maintained for you, and they send you a report. They say what stocks they put it in. They make sure it's diversified. They let you know if you want to change the split or you want to manage the money yourself. There's a holding period. There's a dividend that's paid, and the idea that just anyone employed in the US with proper paperwork can have access to this is actually amazing. Now, if you're not focused on Egypt, people have the freedom to opt in or opt out to certain stocks, and definitely to buy treasury bonds, and definitely to buy gold or real estate or whatever, but they do not have the luxury or the choice to go to someone, to a professional, someone who does this for a living, and say, listen, I don't know what real estate to buy. I don't know what gold to buy. I don't know what stocks to buy in the local stock market. And there's only like 240 companies in the local stock market. Can you please manage my money for me? But I need to be able to trust you. I need to be able to get a solid return. I need you to not stiff me with the fees. Be very transparent. Um, so how are you going to do this? You have to make sure to get his approval to get part of his salary directly over to you, which means that you have to integrate with the companies that are giving you that are giving him his salary. You also have to give him access to a confidential dashboard, plenty of tech and security to make sure he's able to see his invested money. You also need to give him choices on how and where he wants to invest and on what time frame. So if he's just doing this to buy a car, for example, then you would say, okay, I'll put you in a high yield bond stock combination so that you are ready to buy a car in, for example, a year. And in order to do that, you need to give me X% of your salary each month. And I'll make sure your overall portfolio reaches that target. So this entire system, which people in the US take for granted, just does not exist in Egypt. If you go to
So from what I
Fidelity,
see on Palm, it's a mix of Robinhood slash an ETF.
all these like Thunder, Robinhood, great products. They are channels to invest, but they don't invest for you. Maybe some of them have recommendations. Some of them are like, if you want some help, you want to talk to an expert, do this, but they don't have the license legally
Yeah, this is
or
why I mentioned the word ETF in the middle, because ETFs manage the money for you, and Robinhood makes it easy for
yeah,
you
but
to
you still
invest.
have to be the one that chooses the ETF,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And which means that you now are not like a third world country citizen, but you're like an investor. You have to go look at the past performance of this ETF, look at its dividends, make sure there's no holding period, make sure that you can buy more stocks on margin. Like all of a sudden, it's a job. It's someone's trade, and you're not an expert at it. So it's good that Robinhood offers its own kind of very well designed ETF, but that's not enough. You need to give your money to someone and tell them, you're going to manage it better than I do. However, I need to trust you 24/7, 365. Founded by a couple of financial geniuses. Both of them are friends of mine. They're ex big banks and Goldman. One of them, Ashur, was a director of finance at Amazon. And before that, he was at Goldman Sachs. So he knows what he's doing. They're fully licensed now in Egypt. They manage people's money pretty well, pretty responsibly. They're extremely competitive when it comes to their fee structure. I don't think anyone charges lower fees than they do. They're very clear about how they're going to invest your money. They've made great inroads with how they integrate with companies' payroll and HR departments, so that part of the employee's salary, whatever they approve, goes directly to Palm, and the Palm notify him all the time what's going on with his money. So no service does that, right? For high net worth people, they have like a personal banker that they call whenever they want to find out how their stocks are doing, for example, right? But to do this with millions of people, you need to rely on technology. You need to build solutions that can back this up, and you need to build a pretty sophisticated supply chain, and then make sure it's regulated in the way that allows you to serve your customers best. And just nobody's doing this in Egypt.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of or seen any kind of business model like this. So quite impressive. So reaching our last question, mostly around macro seed in Egypt and the MENA in general. So okay, for an investor looking at Egypt and the Gulf right now, where do you think is the real return? Is it in taking Egyptian companies and expanding them to the GCC? Or you think it's about buying great assets at a discount in Egypt because of the current economy and the currency devaluations?
I think that both can be very successfully executed by very different investors. The investor that's kind of a bit of a vulture who's looking for undervalued assets definitely has a market in Egypt. The investor who's hunting for talent and trying to use the right drive and the right spirit to mobilize an industry in a higher monetized and higher GDP country using very talented Egyptians that already built a presence inside Egypt, uh, they can also do a really good job. But these two investors are very different, right? They have very different skill sets. They don't really sit together. That's what I discovered. The investor who wants to buy an undervalued building, or a small oil rig, or a public park, or a farm that produces strawberries or broccoli or whatever, is more obsessed with licenses, regulations, checks, certifications, running costs, just all sorts of stuff that have very little to do with future potential. They want to make sure that this asset is secure and as risk averse as they can see on paper. So they're very concerned about securing their asset and making sure their money is safe. The other type of investor is just dreaming, like kind of, in a good way. Like they're looking to the future and they're trying to unlock value where value has never been unlocked before, based on certain signs and markers that they can see. I think Egypt is fertile ground for both of them. I think there's many undervalued assets, and I think some of the people that I've seen are very shrewd in defining these assets and taking out what they need. And there's some people, I think there's less of them, but also some people who are able to recognize potential and then able to adapt it to a different environment and scale it there. But the first type is more prevalent and more well trained and more accustomed to the Egyptian economy and the way of doing things than the second type, which is why VCs historically in Egypt haven't done that well. It's not because these people are stupid; they're not. Like I've met quite a few of them. They're really, really smart. It's just a question of what works and what doesn't in this environment. And some of them have succeeded, and some of the companies have shown phenomenal returns. But by and large, the VC industry is still behind. The PE industry has always been here. It was not called PE except in the last 20 years. But before that, it was just called private investment, which were investors who understood the landscape extremely well, had no qualms or dreams or confusion about where this was going to reach. They just wanted a boring, nice business that generated cash, that continued to kind of reflect in their bank account. And so with that, while embracing that truth comes a lot of understanding that VCs lack. But I think VCs are catching up, and they're becoming more realistic in their expectations, in their investment choices, and in their the horses they pick to fund and then to scale. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in any case, thank you so much for your time. We have reached the end. Where can people find you, reach out to you, and maybe potentially find Palm? Yes, it's very interesting.
Palm is all over the place. Like they're being very noisy these days, which is a good thing. Everyone's hearing about them. And you can download the app. It's straight on the App Store, especially in Egypt. I'm available. I haven't been that active on LinkedIn lately. I've been busy with kind of the day-to-day work that I've been doing. But you know, I think if someone leaves me a message, I'll always come back to it, even if I don't reply immediately. But if there's a delay, then please forgive me.
Thank you, Nabil, for the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you guys for listening. You can know more about Nabil on the description below, and feel free to follow us both on LinkedIn. All related info will be on the description below. Thank you.